our minds, but we must empower our wills. In order to change this epidemic of police shootings and victimization of African Americans and people of color, there must be more will along with empowering our minds. In our first workshops, we've had three previous workshops. And the first workshop, Faith and Families, Carriers of Hope for Our Community, took a look at the three major focal points of our community: the church, the home, and the family. And we tried to determine just how each of those entities, um, through their work and through our participation, how each of those entities are currently under fire. While we struggle to protect and extend voting rights, expand job opportunity, and improve the public health, um, we alleviate poverty and create safer communities, we must also remember that relationships are important. This is one of the key points of that workshop. A second key point was that we must improve the quality of our relationships in our families, in our homes and churches if we are going to be effective. Our second workshop, we found that some conclusions from the second workshop dealt with the neglect of underachievement and abandonment of our children as a priority for each of our three segments: the church, home, and family. And we found that this is a direct link to the cradle to the prison pipeline that currently exists. The United States currently is in the middle, is the world's leader in incarceration. And we talked about the fact that more than 2.2 million persons are currently in prison in either our federal prison system or our local jails. In the last census, we found that 9 out of 10, 90% of the Black respondents view their wages or earnings as too low to support their families. So these were major conclusions from that workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Our third workshop was held by Zoom just a few weeks ago and continued the theme of healing our wounds. And in this session, the focus was on the impact of racism on people of color. Major findings, we find that race, as we know, is a powerful social idea that gives people different levels of access to opportunities and resources. We find that we concluded that the impact of racism affects everyone, whether we realize it or not. However, structural and institutional racism use policies and organizational programs to the benefit of the dominant group, uh, while which we know are Caucasians, and to the detriment of people of color. And that's one of the dynamics that you will always see in countries in which there is a caste system. You will see the dominant culture doing everything in their power to stay in power. Okay? Those were some of the main ideas that we dealt with in the past three sessions. Dr. Audra Grant will now take us on to the bridges to change,
All right.
people, power, and policy.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And as we can see, the title of this evening's discussion, because I truly know that we all will be engaging in the dialogue, if we will carefully look at the title, Healing Our Wounds, Transitioning to Racial equity. And when we look at that word healing, it means and lets us know that there is a wound, that there has been an injury, that there has been hurt, there has been pain. And the pain that we as African Americans have experienced for over 400 years is multifaceted. Not only the physical pain that we endured during slavery, and even now as we look at the lethality and the illegality and the brutality coming from our police departments, but also the psychological impact, emotional, social, and most of all, equally, spiritually. So when we talk about healing, the balm from Gilead has to be layered. And we hope that as we work together, we will discuss and look at specifics for each of those unique layers. The key word in our topic also, transitioning to racial equality. Transition means that we should engage in transitional justice. Transitional justice. And Dr. Boyce, I thank you so much for giving us that title, because that word is so key. Transitional justice. We cannot move to that level of healing until there has to be an admission of wrongdoing. There has to be an acknowledgement that this injury was brought upon a people, and that this injury is still being inflicted upon our people. So for our vocabulary lesson tonight, quote unquote, transitional justice. And that is when America admits that our society is racist, that racism is alive and well. I don't know how many of you last night may have been watching the Republican National Convention, wherein our former governor, Nikki Haley, unabashedly, unashamedly looked in the camera and said that America is not racist. And it's such a double message that was being sent. And so until each person, or at least a majority of the persons, admit and acknowledge the history of the pain that was inflicted, we know that we still have a lot of work to do. I'll be mindful of our time tonight, and I'll share a brief PowerPoint with you, perhaps not all components of it, but certainly to let us know that our families, our communities, Greenville, Spartanburg, Easley, we face almost an impossible choice. Either we will have, the choice is to have safe neighborhoods or our civil rights. And it seems that we cannot have a balance there. That if we want to have safe neighborhoods, it's almost an admission that we're willing to die for our safety. And as Pastor Boyce had said earlier, with Brother Jacob Blake's accostement on last night, we see that a lot of times we move to that level of death in terms of our communities. So we don't feel safe. We don't feel safe. We don't have that trust. We'll continue to move forward with our discussion tonight, and to realize that as we embark upon this work, this journey, that we're standing on the shoulders of icons and John Lewis, who just left us, and Martin Luther King, and that there has been progress. Lest we view our work tonight as being undaunting, impossible, it is possible, because there have been steps towards progress. And there is a lot that we already know about the type of change that we would like to see take place in policing, and that a lot is happening positively across our nation. Policies are being developed that do encourage respect, accountability, and as well as safety in our communities. We know that cities are also adopting anti-racial profiling policies, requiring law enforcement to wear body cameras, wherein that data is collected and is studied, and the behavior of our police officers have been brought under scrutiny and accountability at a much higher level than it has been perhaps even 10 years in the past. We see that the psychological makeup of police officers who are more prone to commit acts of violence in the quote unquote line of duty. We know that many departments have put in place early warning signs to track high risk officers in order to give them the emotional support that they need in this challenging work that they bring forth. Because we know that every police officer is not a quote unquote bad police officer, but those who are prone, those who will move and act without thinking, also are receiving psychological help. We look at, in terms of our police reform, we know that there are other majors that are going forth, initiatives that are going forth, and it must be a comprehensive endeavor. Yes, we know that many of our cities have placed more African-American officers within their ranks. Is a more diverse personnel that we see policing our neighborhoods now, and um, establishment of civilian review boards, and we'll speak on that at the end of this presentation. And my point is, we want to see sustained improvement, and in order to have sustained improvement in community police relations, these efforts must be maintained and must be continued. Um, Sometimes we will say that, well, we protest and we raise our voices, and then within a few weeks we grow silent again. So hopefully tonight, as we move forth, we will add to that level of maintaining positive relations, thereby eliminating police brutality. And so as we move forward, and I will move forward to a very important topic for us to hang our hats on, the public trust, the basis of public trust. And we are the public. We want to have information that will allow us to assess how we feel, when there are killings in our neighborhood, when there are acts of brutality. And we as a people want to feel that we are treated equally. And so at the heart of the unrest, at the heart of the brutality that we're seeing, we realize that there is that need for trust to be built, maintained, and sustained. And then we ask ourselves the question, how can we have that trust? How can we have that trust when we see acts of Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck, and recently, last night, Jacob Blake being grabbed by his t-shirt and shot in the back in the front of his children. And so the relevant question is, how can we develop that trust? And what will it take for that to take place? And also the issue of respect is particularly important in terms of public controversies involving the police. And especially when we realize that our young men particularly are stopped, frisked, thrown to the ground, handcuffed, and often shot in the back while running away. So this, my brothers and sisters, tonight is an issue of humanity. Humanity, basic humanity, the treatment of one human being to another. And how do we dismantle and unravel the constructs that have placed white supremacy at the top of the agenda, at the heart of this nation. And we know that to make America great again is to return to a day when that slavery, when the white culture was dominant over ours. And so at the heart of this is our belief that we are being treated fairly, and that if we are treated fairly, then we will defer to the authority of the police. We will cooperate in reporting crimes and criminals, even providing testimony and helping to hold our officials accountable if we feel that trust, if we feel that respect in the enforcement of our laws. If the police are trusted, then we're more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt, allowing them time to investigate and to respond to different actions, contentious actions. We know that that's the main hesitancy that police officers will have, or we have to investigate. And there are no arrests. As we look at Breonna Taylor and those who have been literally murdered in their beds, those officers have not been brought in for accountability. So again, it goes back to developing trust or dialogue that will promote trust. We move quickly tonight to ask ourselves, what the community and city can do? As we know, Greenville, we had that unrest in June as a repercussion from the George Floyd incident. And to first step to truly have a strong definition of police accountability. Police accountability simply means that police officers will act responsibly for all of their actions and treat citizens, regardless of our race or ethnicity, in a respectful and lawful manner. Now that's a handful, but it is at the heart of the work that will continue to move forth, that is moving forth across our nation. And we as citizens are accountable. We are accountable when we see and know that situations have been brought forth that are not right, to speak out. And as you all may know, next week there should be a national protest in Washington to stand as one nation for this. And in the time that I do have, what can we do? What steps can we take? Get to know our police officers who patrol your neighborhood. That can be daunting, that can be challenging. But I do feel that it is quite possible, if not with the ones who are patrolling your community, but to foster those relationships with our local city officials. And there have been great steps of progress in Greenville, as well as in Spartanburg and the surrounding areas. And we know that the second suggestion here on this particular slide, to ask our local city council representative to host a neighborhood meeting to discuss policy and community relations. And as you know, Zoom is now our platform for doing that. And certainly we want to secure that. We can never forget about our young people, to continue to encourage and to teach our young people on conducting themselves when confronted by police officers. I'm the mother of 2 sons and 3 grandsons, and I know that, and also my husband, I know that a lot of times in their just driving and going about their daily business, that sometimes their actions may not appear to be what the police officers may think is appropriate. And it places an extra opportunity on each of us to continue to reach out and to teach our young people in terms of the response to give when brought forth. And as we continue to look at what can be done, we know that Greenville has moved eons since the summer of June, that we now have the Greenville Citizens Advisory Panel on Public Safety that has been put in place by the mayor. The advisory panel is made up of 9 members who will work to identify public safety issues and improve communication between the Greenville Police Department and the community. And they did have a meeting, I'm sure as you all well know, just last week or the week before that. The Citizens Advisory Panel on Public Safety, it will include the current chair and vice chair. It does include the current chair and vice chair of the city's Public Safety Citizen Review Board. So before this panel was put in place, there is, a Citizens Public Safety Review Board. And the mayor and city council members will each appoint one member for the panel. And the mayor will decide, or has decided, who will serve as the chairman, and who is serving as that chairman is none other than our very own Reverend Stacy Mills. And he was on TV about 3 days ago, wherein they were hosting their meeting, and were dealing with some very specific issues as it related to the city of Greenville. And so we know that that is a very strong step forward in the work that lies ahead. And the goals of this advisory panel on public safety, they will be reviewing, in the process of reviewing current Greenville Police Department policies, including the use of force, body-worn camera policies, canine policies and training policies, de-escalation tactics. And all of this information is undergoing review by this panel. This panel will review the Greenville Police Department minority hiring practices and developing recommendations for improvement in that area. They are also reviewing the composition, the duties and responsibilities of the public safety citizen review, and that was created back in 2005. So you can see the city has been addressing this issue, is addressing it, and has plans for future and further development. And the goal for this panel of 9, of which Reverend Mills is heading, they're to complete that work within 60 days of its first meeting and present recommendations to council. And so we know that their work is intense, that work is deliberate, that work is strategic. And I am very confident that it will truly be very fruitful. And perhaps we as this body can be a pipeline for the actual conduct or the actualization of those goals. And I'd like for us to, in the 2 minutes that I have left, amen, Frederick Douglass told us, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. If there is no struggle, my brothers and sisters, there is no progress. And so we know then that the struggle is powerful. It requires strength for the struggle, and our strength comes from Almighty God, the Holy Spirit moving within each of us. And yes, we can do this. Why? Because our lives matter. Our lives matter. I could preach on and on, but I will defer to Brother Art Grant to continue with our information sharing for tonight. Thank you for your time and for your attention. Thank you. Brother Grant, who would now take us to use of force in Greenville County, the problem and possible solutions. Brother Grant.
Yes, thank you. And before I get to that, I'd like to go back to this issue of accountability that we talked about. When we hear the term accountability, what do the rest of you think about? What does that mean to hold our police and ourselves accountable?
That's a powerful question. Thank you for turning it back on to us. I think the first thing that came to my mind was making sure that we do the right thing. Make sure that everybody's doing the right thing. Equity, equality, fairness, justice, truth, that we are adhering to that standard of conduct.
And I submit to you, and there may be others that would like to jump in with that, but I submit to you that is part of the problem, because most police, most of us see ourselves as being accountable. We offer condolences to the families that have been victimized, etc. Yet some of us do not show up at the county council meetings, myself included, and we don't speak to our representatives. We fail to be a presence in the voting dynamic. All of these things impact the ability of a group of people to see themselves as they really are. You see, it's very easy to critique someone else, but for an organization to critique itself, as we are asking the police to do, that requires a willingness to change minds, change hearts, change the way we have been going about the business. As I began our session, I began with the quote that God can empower our minds, but we must empower our wills. That is crucial to addressing this issue of excessive use of force. When Dr. Boyce asked us to take a look at this whole notion of the report that was filed with the Greenville County, with County Council concerning the Greenville County Sheriff's Office, I found that there were 2 or 3 different articles that addressed it, but the one that kind of hit home with me was an article by a gentleman named Daniel J. Gross of the Greenville News, which took place on June 17th, 2010 and 20. And I'm going to read some of this to us. According to a recent article in the Greenville News, Greenville Sheriff's deputies topped the list of police shootings in South Carolina during the last 2 years. But, he said, nobody seems to know why. Think about that. We topped the list, but at that time, nobody seemed to know why. And that's at the core of accountability if we're going to implement a change. They reported that in a 6-month investigation, the Greenville News analyzed 10 years of statewide shootings data and investigated the FBI files. They also investigated personnel records. And the following findings that I will share with you are a composite of all of those efforts. The first thing I would point out, and feel free to stop me at any point you have a question or a comment about anything that is said, was the first thing was that 1 out of every 8 people killed by an officer in South Carolina died in a shooting that involved a Greenville County Sheriff's deputy. 1 out of every 8. Something wrong with that picture, ladies and gentlemen. This was between the years of 2009
can you hear me okay?
and 2018. Yes, I can.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Dr. Hart?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
I'm kind of hearing some breaking up on my end. I don't know if it's just your feed or my feed. Can you hear me okay? Wave if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. We do have Sheriff Lewis on the line. I want to acknowledge he's here. I definitely know that this is a good segue for him to just introduce himself and the comments that he may have. I appreciate his time. Sheriff Lewis, say good evening to us.
Hey, good evening. Thank you. I apologize for being late. I was trying to finish up one meeting and get on here to Zoom this one, but thank y'all. It's a pleasure to be here so far, and I certainly didn't mean to interrupt anybody. I'm familiar with the article he's reading from the Greenville News from Daniel Gross. So I came in kind of just shortly before that, but thank y'all for the invite.
Yes, and I think that's a very powerful point to take into consideration. The predecessor, the sheriff who was in charge before that time, didn't even want these investigations to take place. I understand. He was opposed to having a panel of citizens convened to take a look at these particular instances. Another factor that came out was that African Americans are shot by officers at a disproportionately higher rate than whites, both in Greenville County and across the state. This is not just a problem with Greenville County. As we know, all we have to do is turn on the TV station, and it's a national problem. One of the related problems in this whole dynamic that we saw was that saying that my battery is running low here, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well,
I think he dropped off the call, everybody.
yes.
Miss Archer, see if he can go ahead and log back on while he's coming back on,
I'll go in.
everybody. Thank you all for joining in. So I hope that while we have these next 50 minutes left, you can reach out to friends and social media, because this is something we want to grow in the dialogue tonight regarding the emotional impact that it has on our nation, the emotional impact that it has on our community. I want everybody to take about 10 minutes, and doesn't matter who starts it, to talk about what you're feeling. Because I think when we ignore what people are feeling, we actually are inviting more violence and more discord in our community and in our nation. Ignore people's humanity in general, we will see more discord and violence particularly. That's just my basic feel about what's going on. Not just what happened in Minneapolis, not just what happened in Louisville, not what happened in Kenosha. It happens right here in our community. And it doesn't all have to end in death for us to talk about what we're feeling. And what I feel as a father of two children, a husband, I have a 11-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. I want them to mature with some optimism about their future here in this country. As Black children, as human beings, I want them to be that they can live in a world where they not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of character. Unfortunately, my friends, in my view, we are not there yet. We're not in an era where my son, at the age of 7, is simply just seen as a human being. He's seen by the color of his skin and pretty much where he goes. Before he opens his mouth, before he says a word, he is largely judged by the content of his character. And I, as a father, my stewardship as a father is judged by my preparedness, how I prepare him to live in that world. Y'all can say amen. Y'all don't have to say ouch, amen. I have to prepare him and my daughter to live in a world where there may be some high level of racial conflict in their lifetime. And to ignore that would be some sense of coddling my children. But to take it to another extreme would almost have us afraid to have our children go outside. So I'm feeling a sense of frustration, not at police officers in general, but in particular to those officers who seem to be ignoring the pattern of their counterparts who are harming men of color, particularly African American men, and is seemingly believing that they're going to get away with it. You would think that after Trayvon Martin, after Mike Brown, after Eric Garner, after all of these incidents happened over the years, that police officers will be a little more careful when dealing with an unarmed person. I'm not convinced that a person running away from a police officer that's unarmed is a threat to anybody. Somebody here might be able to make the case to help enlighten me, but when you're running from a police officer, as you are unarmed, I don't see how you're a threat to anybody. It's no than a deer running across I-85 at 11 o'clock at night. That deer is more of a threat to the driver of the car than the deer is a threat to himself, because the deer is putting himself in harm's way. So an unarmed black man running away from police, he is likely to be the one that's going to be harmed as opposed to the community at large. So anybody that want to comment at this session, we'll come back to you, Dr. R. What are you feeling, everybody? Are you willing to talk about that at this particular juncture? Pastor Tracy, anything you want to share? What you feeling?
I was just thinking, Pastor Boyce, from a pastoral perspective, and very much from a female pastoral perspective, is that when all the smoke clears, when the families are mourning, when they are hurt and broken and there's a lot of unrest, we are left in the communities to try and help these people put their lives back together. And when you cannot give a viable answer as to why, all you can do a lot of times is sit there, shake your head, and you have to agree. But there's very little a lot of times that we can say to heal the community, and that is frustrating. It is very hurtful, and in so many cases I can remember just feeling helpless. What do we do from here, and where do we go from this place? Because everybody else will go back to their communities. A lot of times, I know, Pastor, we're left with the grieving sisters, the grieving mothers, the brothers, the families that take years and years to heal. And behind the scenes, there's a lot of anger, a lot of rage, and a lot of frustration. And we are steadily working untiringly, trying to bring healing to those families. So definitely frustration, helplessness, a myriad of emotions. Absolutely.
Thank you, Pastor. Dr. Art, you comment on that?
Yes, I think, first of all, I'd like to apologize. I'm not sure what happened to my computer, but the conversation is rich and right on target with what we were about to say. The trouble with statistics is that they often come across as an insurmountable wall of blame, and that's not our intention tonight. We all have to take responsibility and accountability for making changes in the way we view each other, both as citizens of America and of Greenville County and as of police. Part of that problem that you talked about in terms of people being shot running away, and in my readings for this workshop, I found out that across the country, there are policies that say that if a person is deemed or considered to be resisting arrest, that the police officer has the right to use force to stop this. Well, some people misinterpret that to mean that here's a man walking back to his car, that we have to use lethal force. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. Because on the contrary, they talked about another police, another community, and I think this was in the Midwest, and followed the shooting of the death of Brother Floyd, in which there was a young man who was upset and was brandishing a knife, but was clearly not out to harm anyone nearby. The police chose not to take him down, to walk alongside him for a city block, trying to convince him that this was not the way to go about resolving his issues. And at the end of this block, he ended up tripping and losing his knife, and they were able to arrest the person without harm without anybody, any loss of life or any injury to anyone. I submit that part of our problem is that sometimes our policies do not necessarily link up with our understanding of what it means to be a human, what it means to have life. We worry so much about fulfilling out of fear, fulfilling our policies, that we forget that that's a human being that we have to take under consideration with that. I don't know at this point, Reverend Broyce, whether you needed me to continue with those statistics. We can read that article for yourselves. Most of you were aware of it, but I think the thing that concerned me most in reviewing the report was that they had several instances reported in which a person had used excessive force, but was allowed days, even weeks, to prepare a written record of what happened. That certainly shouldn't be, and I'm sure that has probably been corrected by our present sheriff, hopefully going down. But this was, again, not just a Greenville County problem, but this was reflective of what was happening in Greenville County at that particular time. They mentioned that 1 in 5 shootings by the Greenville Sheriff's Office were never reported to SLED, which their own policies said at that time during the tenure of Sheriff Brown. It said that they had the responsibility to report each and every use of force, every shooting to SLED. Those were just some of the kinds of things that I think when we talk about accountability, it's kind of hard to not feel worked up about. And I invite us to take a look at that. A lot of times, I think we look at the old argument that increases in violent crime mandate that we use excessive force. Well, that was proven to be deemed to be just an excuse, according to a research by the University of South Carolina, specifically Seth Stroughton, who was a professor at the University of South Carolina. The statistics just don't support that claim, because we look at the fact that Greenville County has the highest population in the state of South Carolina. Richland County, though, is second, yet Richland County had fewer than half of the shootings of Greenville County, the use of force by police on thing, than Greenville County. These are issues that we can't take lightly, and they speak to the need for not just individual change, although I think it always starts with hiring people of character, hiring people who do not get confused about their responsibilities, both to protect and serve, but also to use good judgment. And I'll pause there for Reverend Broyce for those who would
Thank
like
you,
to be
Dr. Art. What I want to do during the last part of the session, if you have some comments, Sheriff Lewis, that you want to, and then allow anyone to ask any questions, we want about 10 minutes for that. And then we'll share some other ideas that we have moving forward for our forum. But we're so inspired by your participation tonight, Sheriff. We'll give you a chance to give comments about what you've heard so far.
Thank you. I had to find that mute button. I'm sitting in my truck. It's certainly Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Does everyone hear him okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
It's certainly encouraging to have these type of meetings. It's unfortunate we can't have them face to face, but I think a couple of issues were brought to light. The doctor was talking about. I think, is it Dr. Grant? Is that your name, sir?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you for what you were saying. You know, we got training issues we got to work on. We live in a different time in law enforcement. One of the things you mentioned when I first got on here was accountability. We have to be more accountable. This community has to be more accountable for each other, but us in law enforcement, the leaders in law enforcement, have to force our people to be accountable. Unfortunately, I've worked all day and I hadn't been able to be out on the road or to watch the interactions of our deputies with the public. We have to trust them to be accountable to each other and to report issues. You know, if you see your beat partner doing something that you wouldn't do, or see him treat somebody the way you wouldn't treat them, we have to be able to call each other out on those things. And that's one of the things we're doing training wise, is encouraging people. We're having conversations in the community, and that's great. We have to have them with ourselves inside our profession, inside the building, to find out what's going on. The second part of that is getting people hired. We've started an equity and inclusion division, which looks at how do we make the sheriff's office look like our community? How do we make it represent our community? So we're taking some notes from other parts of the country. We have two great people who are starting that program and looking at the hiring practices that we have. Is there a way that we're excluding really good people? You know, really looking at our process to make sure we want good quality candidates. But the most important thing is those people with integrity. Who's going to do the right thing when nobody's looking? And how do we measure that? You know, do we need to have them in field training longer to evaluate them and find out in those critical decisions, you know, at what direction are they going to go? So the country's changing, things are shifting for sure. And it's unfortunately there's not a quick fix for a lot of things, but I think recognizing it and at least taking those small steps, like I think it was Miss Grant was saying when I first got on, she had a diagram up and I didn't have my glasses on, so I couldn't see it, but or she had a kind of overhead up, taking those small steps to at least encourage each other and at least move in the right direction, and recognizing we have a problem, admitting we having a problem, and now work toward those solutions. And I think that's why we're talking here tonight.
All right. Thank you, Sheriff Lewis. Any comments or questions anyone from the panel has for the sheriff?
Yes, I would, again, thank you, Sheriff Lewis, for being with us tonight. And
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. As we look to the completion of the Greenville Citizens Advisory Panel on Public Safety, would you share with us, as that group will bring forth recommendations to City Council, County Council, your role, commitment, actions on those recommendations as they come forth?
Absolutely. That's the only reason why we created it, is to get community input. And we took one person from each council person's district. We just got all the applications in yesterday. So
Yes.
we're taking 2 applications from each district, and there's 12 of those. And so we got 24 applications we're going through. And whoever doesn't get picked this time, it's a 1-year term, can go and be picked for the following year. So that's what we're looking at. We want community input. We want to develop relationships, not just with people we know or people we're comfortable around. We really want to have those difficult conversations, much like the one we're having now. Anytime you talk about race and you talk about brutality, you talk about law enforcement, somebody's going to be uncomfortable. And we have to be made uncomfortable, really, to recognize that, you know what, there's an issue. Let's move forward and try to find a solution. And this community advisory committee that we have, that we're starting, is certainly in the very infant stages, at the very beginning, but I think it gives us a good basis going forward, because it's not a very popular thing statewide. for sure. But we're
Right.
committed to
Right.
it, and we're going to make it work. And I think that comes with getting the right people in the right spot to be very honest and be very open, and to have some true conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And- all right.
And,
Thank you.
and also, Sheriff, I'd like to say that you're to be congratulated for supporting the creation of this advisory council. I think, though, just to receive the advice of the council, and if it's not followed by constructive actions, we will continue to have difficulties above and beyond our control. And I'd like to know what kinds of things you are doing, or your office is doing, to try to help change the culture of policing in Greenville County.
Well, that's a great question, and that starts with me. I'm the sheriff. It's my responsibility, no matter what happens. If somebody's in a Greenville County Sheriff's Department uniform and they do something, I'm the one that's going to have to answer for that. The flip side of that is, I think if I come in and set the tone and set the example, I think that'll filter down. We do have a culture issue. You know, one of the first things I did the second, third week of June, after some protests and those things, we were working them. I said, let's talk to all of our minority employees. They don't have to be a deputy. It can be a administrative assistant. It can be a dispatcher. It can be anybody.
Right.
If you're male, female, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. Get them all in a room, have a meeting, and find out what kind of issues we have, because I don't know. You know, I don't know how you feel. Had you rather be protesting, or had you rather be working today? I wanted to know. And I agreed not to be there, but it didn't take long, just 10 to 15 minutes. And they called and specifically requested that I come over there. So I did. And it was about a 2.5-hour conversation that was very enlightening for me. And I think just people talking, I think we left there a lot better than we did when we walked in, because people got to vent and they got to say whatever they wanted to say. You can't, some people can't explain how they feel. And it may take the help of somebody else that's in there. That we had plenty of people that would say, you know, I just feel like I didn't get promoted, and I, you know, I was really kind of put aside because I wasn't part of a certain clique, or maybe it was because I was kind of out of sight or out of mind. Maybe it was because I'm a black male in an all-white male world. When somebody finally said that, there was 3 or 4 other black deputies that were in there, male deputies, that were like, man, I get it. I've been wanting to say that for 30 minutes. Because they were afraid to say it. They didn't know, you know, am I going to take offense to it? So it starts with me, Mr. Grant. I have to set the tone for that. And I can tell you that I pray fervently that the Lord gives me wisdom to deal with these issues. And I truly, I want to be an example. I want to be a trendsetter. I want it to start here. And the only way to prove that I'm committed is to start showing results, and we're working toward that.
Yes.
Right.
Can you tell us, and I won't hog the questions, this will be my last question by Dr. Boyce, but I wanted to know one disturbing statistic that I saw in that report was the fact that a number of shooting incidents that were not fatal, but were mandated by your own policy to be reported, they simply were not. And when those kinds of things happen, it kind of puts a barrier between developing trust between the community and the police force. And what is being done to help every member of your staff to understand that that is not professional conduct, that it won't be tolerated?
I can tell you, I know that statistic. I know that phrase about the statistic is in that article. I've never known that to be true. And I'm any past sheriff or anybody, we're required to report uses of force in any situation, not only to our own department, But when you talk about discharging a firearm at all, that has to be reported to SLED. I was surprised to see, and we still don't know where they got that from, to be quite honest. Unless somebody was talking about an accidental discharge. If a deputy was running around the house and he fell and he had his weapon out, it went off and it went off in the ground, we don't have to report that to SLED. We have to report that. We do self-reporting to the Office of Professional Standards. But that, the way he may have worded, Daniel Gross may have worded that wrong. I'm not real sure, but we can't find where that ever happened and nobody reported it. That would be criminal for us not to do that. So now getting past that part, what we have to do is we're nationally accredited. When you violate the policy, whether it's one that just affects maybe a written reprimand and it's not a fireable or it's not punishable by suspension in some way, even the, I hate to say the smallest, but the least maybe significant violation of not turning paperwork in on time, if we don't deal with those things with an even hand and hold each other accountable, and that's a problem. And we have to do better at that. And we've done that in 5.5 months. I can tell you, we enforce our policy, we enforce the rules. Now, some things we don't find out, we may not even know about now, but when we find out, we have to hold people accountable. The flip side, again, in the beginning of this conversation, when I got in it, transparency is key. Nobody, I don't trust anybody. If I find out that you're not open and honest with me, our conversation will stop, and I will ignore you because I know you're not being truthful. So the key for me is to be transparent in my office with the public, with the media, and be transparent with the citizens. But I have to be transparent with the men and women who work at the sheriff's office because I expect the same out of them. And I believe in time, I truly do, that'll filter out into the community and we can start building relationships based on trust again. Not just trusting somebody you don't know, because we made a mistake in the past that, hey, if this person says they're a law enforcement, I'm supposed to trust them. This person says they're a pastor, I'm supposed to trust them. The fact is, people that get in trouble will try to deceive you. They will do anything they can to scurry away from being called out or held accountable for it. So it's up to us to truly be transparent and hold ourselves accountable. The community's holding us accountable. There is nothing that is going to pack this away and people are going to forget about what's happened in this country in the last 6 months. Now we're moving forward. So let's be better for it. Let's be better people for it. Let's be better citizens for it. Let's be better servants as the Lord would want us to be as we learn and grow together. But we have to be accountable and we have to be truthful. We have to be transparent.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Lewis.
Thank y'all.
I want to give anybody else a chance to ask any questions. You've got the Sheriff of Greenville County, Sheriff Lewis, on the line. If you have any questions that you want to entertain to him about what's going on in your community where you live or where you worship, I know we're having a practice social distancing with our church is doing live streaming, but your church is in a community. So if there are issues in your community that need to be addressed, you want to bring those to the table now, you can do that at this time. Anyone? Okay.
I had a question,
Go
Pastor,
ahead.
Dr. Boyce.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Lewis, for joining us on tonight. And my question, you touched on it just a little bit about if there's a partner and they see that partner doing something that they should not be doing, that's not within the guidelines or does not line up with the values, what have you, or what you are expecting of those guys and females out there on the street. Is there a way for them to report with and there's no fear of retaliation, and how you kind of modeling and developing that culture and that atmosphere within the sheriff's office?
Sure. Hey, Miss Fleming, I hope you're doing well.
I am.
I had to scroll over to find your picture to see
Oh.
who's talking, but it's great to see you. We have instituted a policy that you are required to report misconduct. You are required to, and when I say misconduct, use of force, excessive use of force falls in that category. Any policy violation, now you're required. The criminal side of things, if you see another officer that is doing something that may be criminal, you can be criminally responsible, criminally liable as well if an investigation kicked off and we found that you were somehow withholding information that could have stopped the crime. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing we have to do is to prove that we're willing to enforce that. And it happened, I can tell you exactly how it happened. A young man was arrested. A deputy made a car stop, and a young man was arrested who was standing in his yard. He did nothing wrong. He was just watching the conduct of the police officer stopping a violator in his front yard. That man was later arrested and taken to jail for interfering with police. I had a local activist who called me and said, "Sheriff, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I'm just telling you, this is what happened." So we spoke to the guy that was arrested. We did a comprehensive investigation, body camera footage, in-car footage, statements from other people, statements from the person that was arrested. And I had to call that deputy in who was untruthful and terminate his employment. Now, he had a grievance process. He went through that. They upheld the termination. And we hand that over to SLED, who's investigating that now for criminal charges against him. That's just something we're not going to cover that up. We're not going to act like that didn't happen. We're not just going to terminate and let it go. We have to let people know we're going to set the standard. No matter who the sheriff is, we're going to set the standard now for whoever may come in and take over in 4 years or 8 years or whatever the case, that we have set the standard for how we're going to run this agency because the public deserves it. They expect it. That's what we should do. That's what we should do for each other. And they can report their beat partners. They can report another employee completely anonymously with no repercussions whatsoever. And we would never tell the employee they told on if the investigation concluded that they were guilty of doing something. We would never release that information to that deputy for any type of retribution.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sheriff, I got a data question. Who is your analyst for the Sheriff's Department that actually keeps up with the crime data for the Sheriff's Department?
Pam Taylor is our crime analysis person,
okay.
Who does a great job, and she works right next to our Office of Professional Standards.
Okay.
So she has good information. She has real-time information, and she gets that to us extremely quick. Now, what happens is if somebody FOIAs that information, it'll go through our legal department. They'll get it from Ms. Taylor, and then once they get it, they disseminate it to the Greenville News or whoever asked for it.
Okay, Pam Taylor. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the other person, the position you named was what? Community?
Are you talking about the Office of Professional Standards, the legal department?
Yeah. Yeah. Who's that contact person?
Greta McIntyre.
Greta McIntyre.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
If you filed a Freedom of Information request, it would go to Greta, and she would validate it to make sure it's going to a real person, and then they would call Pam Taylor for that information, and you would eventually get it from Greta. I hope that answered your question.
It does. It does. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Dr. Art and Dr. Audrey, if there are other questions, we're going to pass it back over to you.
Well, there's one last question I would like to ask Sheriff Lewis. What would you consider to be your greatest challenge so far as you go through your daily?
Well, sir, there's been a lot of them. My first day in office, the governor shut the whole state down. So that proved to be a challenge to learn what COVID-19 was and how to begin to deal with that. But I think honestly, my biggest personal challenge is to certainly trying to stay on track and on focus on real issues and don't get sidetracked by those things, because so many people are pulling at you. It's very easy to get deviated away from what your plan is. The biggest the biggest employee issue, the biggest issue of being the sheriff, for me as an agency head, is certainly trying to change the culture in upstate law enforcement, because we have a huge reach, being the sheriff of this county, this size. I have 615 employees, and we can do it. I know we can do it. I know God's got a plan for me to do it. That's why he put me here. I did not win this election because I raised the most money, or I'm a smooth talker, or any of that stuff. I firmly believe, and you'll never convince me otherwise, God put me here for a purpose. He's got a plan for me going forward. He knows what I'm supposed to do. And it's just keeping my eye and my head on target with what the Lord wants me to do, prayerful, and trying to follow his steps he has laid out for me, and changing the culture and the mindset of upstate law enforcement inside our building. And we got a great relationship with Greenville City. Things couldn't be any better. And it's, I know it's small steps, and we all want to see great progress, and we want immediate results, but we are moving the right direction. I promise you. It's really been a blessing to be a part of it.
Okay. Go ahead, Audrey.
Not necessarily as a final word, but hopefully a word of encouragement. And I think the statement goes to both Sheriff Lewis and Dr. Boyce, pastors and police department, Department of Public Safety. Can both of you share with us a collective vision in terms of continuing not only dialogue, but action, relationship between community, church, and our law enforcement, and how that vision can merge, resulting in improved relationships all the way around? This truly has been a wonderful foundation building opportunity, relationship building, and we trust that it will go forth. And the group that is on tonight, I won't speak for everybody else, but I feel in my heart that we're committed to helping, serving in whatever capacity is deemed necessary. So I hope that both of you can just share with us joining partners, a community group, pastors and partners. Thank you so much.
My vision for the association, we have 32 churches in the Greenville County area. Pastor Fleming has just celebrated going into a new building over in Easley, where a majority of her congregants live in that area and partly in Greenville County, but majority of our churches, sheriff, are in Greenville County. And what I envision is us mapping out where our churches are and having a map of where the sheriff police zones are, so that we can have an actual relationship with the deputies that are in our communities, and being intentional in those dialogues proactively.
Yes.
And so the vision I have is that we be proactive and intentional in our communication with one another, because once we are able to establish that rapport, build those relationships, see each other face to face, whether it be Zoom during COVID or face to face after COVID, that we know who is policing our communities. And I think that reduces the confusion and the chaos that we have when an incident occurs. Because one of the things that's kind of a soapbox for me is that when something happens in our communities, whether it be nationally or locally, everybody wants to get up and protest and express their grievances, when the reality is there was a lack of dialogue prior to the incident, which probably in some cases indirectly contributed to the incident. Not in all cases, but in some cases. But what I would love to have, Sheriff Lewis, is a list of those zones that you could email up to our Secretary Janice Brown, and then we could have a list of who those captains are over those zones. We build a dialogue with them, with our pastors proactively, and we could talk about other issues other than just violence that are going on in our communities. Because my personal view is that when you frame policing in the context of a violent incident that happened in the community, it gives people a somewhat narrow-minded view of police work. And I want us to have an open-minded view of what police do and see ourselves as partners and really creating a better community for everybody. And so knowing who those, I know who my captain is where I live. When I first moved here, it was Captain Taylor. I don't know if he's been reassigned, but I live in the West Georgia Road area of Piedmont/Simpsonville. And Captain Taylor was the captain when I first moved here in 2017 to this area. So, we'll be getting with your office and looking to get some of that data so that our pastors can know who their captains and police zones are so that we can work more proactively with the Sheriff's Department.
Thank
Sheriff
you.
Lewis,
And I look forward to that. I think that's a great step for sure. You can find that information on Greenville County Council. You can find the council districts. We'll send you that, as well as our beat areas where deputies are assigned throughout the county. And there's 10 beat areas the county is divided up in. Ms. Grant, I think we just have to put our money where our mouth is, to be honest. I don't think, I think we're going to really have to prove that we're committed and we're engaged, and that'll come with time.
Yeah.
You'll find out quickly who's blowing smoke and who's
That's
really in it to win it. And we can win it. We can, our young people make up about 32% of our population, but they're 100% of the future. We don't invest in them enough. Just like Reverend Boyce is saying, if we get our young people engaged in what law enforcement is and we make it what it is supposed to be, we can set the standard nationwide, and we can do that. It's going to take us getting out of these patrol cars and talking to people, sitting on their porch, knocking on doors, talking in schools, and developing relationships. That's what makes us great, is having the comfort of being able to talk to each other and listen to each other's problems, have those tough conversations. But it's time for your law enforcement and leaders in this county to have some very direct, precise answers for problems. We have to quit putting things off and just pandering to people just to quieten them down, because we got solutions. We just have to allow people the voice to speak up.
Thank you both, and
Thank you, ma'am.
Working and moving forward. Thank you both. Thank you.
all right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Now at this point, we want to thank each of you for participating. Pastor Fleming, you got any closing remarks? Anything you want to say? All right. We have some guests join us nationally. The son of our facilitators. Marcus, you could just click on Wave. I know you're probably working on an IT project or something. And then I think Dr. Kevin Sprinkle joined us earlier. He's a local physician, pediatrician here in the area. But thank all of you for joining us. We will meet again on Tuesday, September 22nd. For our next forum, you'll receive a flyer about that and how we can take action moving forward. We'll get a summary from our facilitators about what we talked about tonight. We really appreciate Sheriff Lewis participating. We hope to get representatives from our federal government offices, from Senator Graham and Senator Scott. And we also hope to get some participation from our state senators and our state representatives as well. We know election day is coming, November 3rd. We hope that you are already registered. If not, please go to scvotes.org. If you are already registered and you want to vote absentee, you have until October 3rd to request your ballot, because your vote does matter. And we hope that you are not voting just to be voted, but voting with a cause and a commitment to change. So thank all of you for joining. Let's give our facilitators a hand, everybody. They've done a great job. I really appreciate their leadership and their service to our community. They're great educators. And I believe that we need to learn and listen during this turbulent time that we're in. And I ask them to do this for us because they're great teachers as well as great administrators and preachers of the gospel as well. So thank you, Dr. Hart. Thank you, Dr. Audrey. Thank all of you for joining in. And we will see you on Tuesday, September 22nd at 6:30 on Zoom.
Right. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.